Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Ashu Sharma. I welcome you all in series of MySQL and Python. So today we will see briefings of database connection and its operations using MySQL and Python. Till now, we have done so many things about that database and how to install that MySQL, that connector, and some of the methods that we use like connect method, like cursor method. So I'm just giving first briefings of all those concepts right from the beginning that whenever we talk about that Python application that is going to be connect with MySQL database at backend, you need to know the following details of MySQL server to perform the connection from Python. The very first one is the username. As you all know, the username that you use to work with MySQL server, the default username for MySQL database is a root. So when you will install that XAMPP server or MAMP server, so you will see when you open that page, localhost php myadmin index.php, you see there is that username which is root, which is by default. Next one is the password. Password is given by the user at the time of installing the MySQL database. If you are using root, then you would not need the password. The password is not required if you are working with root username. Next one is the host name. It is the server name or IP address on which MySQL is running. If you are running on localhost, then you can use localhost or its IP such that 127.0.0. Like that. So host name, either you are using that localhost or its IP 127 dot followed by 3 zeros. Next is database name. Database name to which you want to connect. Here we are using database name test. So test is already I have created, and this test database we are using it in our further example. There is a note. We are using MySQL connector Python module to communicate with MySQL server. So in previous videos, I have explained how to install MySQL connector, and then we have to import this once we start to make that connection with the database. So if I brief these concepts, then you say we require 4 arguments to pass through connection. That first is username, second is password, third is host name, and fourth is database name. These 4 arguments are required. Now move to the next slide. Here we understand the Python MySQL database connection program. So as I said you that import mysql.connector, this is the very first line that you have to use. This line imports the MySQL connector Python module in your program. So you can use this module's API to connect MySQL. API is application programming interface, which is in general used for such cross connection. So that module API is there to connect with MySQL. There is another that given statement from mysql.connector import error. So if there is an error during that connection with database, it throw that error. So MySQL connector error object is used to show us an error when we fail to connect databases or if any other database error occurred while working with the database. For an example, access denied error when username or password is wrong. So we should make sure that these 4 arguments, username, password, host name, and database name, that must be correct. Otherwise, definitely you will find error during the connection. Next is we use connect method. This method we can connect the MySQL database, and this accept as four required parameters, as we already discussed: host, database, username, and password. So very first point, if we brief this, is to import MySQL connector. And then second point is to use this connect method and pass these four parameters. Now move to the next point. Connect method established a connection to the MySQL database from Python application and return MySQL connection object. Then we can use MySQL connection object to perform different operation on MySQL database. Connect method can throw an exception as well, such that a database error if one of the required parameter is wrong. For example, if you provide a database name that is not present in MySQL, then Python application throws an exception. So check the argument that you are passing to this method, as we know connect method. So it is very important to check those credentials. Now move to the next slide. Here we have connection.is_connected. Is_connected is the method of the MySQL connection through which we can verify is our Python application connected with database or not. Then we have connection.cursor. This method returns a cursor object, which is very useful for specific operations at the time of execution of queries. Using a cursor object, we can execute SQL queries. The MySQL cursor class instantiates objects that can execute operations such as SQL statements. Cursor objects interact with MySQL server using a MySQL connection object. At the end, we have this cursor.close and connection.close. In previous videos, I also explained what sort of object we are opening. We have to close them in same sort of order. This is good practice. We cannot remain open that ports because unnecessary wastage of resources. So we have to stop them or close them once we gets over with the work. So cursor.close, this method using the cursor close method, we can close the cursor object. Once we close the cursor object, we cannot execute any SQL statement. And at the end, the connection.close, we are closing the MySQL database connection using a close method of MySQL connection class. Now, in the next slide, we have this diagram. This is very good diagram to present all these points. We can just see that MySQL connector is working as a mediator in between backend and frontend. So Python application is connecting with this MySQL database at the backend. We have this mediator MySQL connector, and definitely we are using an API of that module, Python DB API, which is version 2.0 PEP249. So as we just saw in previous slides, different methods we use for this connectivity. The first one is .connect method. Connection request sent towards that backend. It's connected, then connection.cursor to execute specific queries or execute SQL statements. Cursor.execute, it call execute method. And finally, it retrieve results from the database and it back towards connector, Python, and through API, we are connecting with the database through the Python application and generating the result. So it's a very smart process if we just brief it. Very first, we have that installation of MySQL connector. Then we call connect method because of connection request sent to the MySQL through API of MySQL connector. Once connection is established, then we call cursor, and through cursor we execute SQL queries, and it retrieves results from the MySQL and send back to the that front end side. So this is the way this whole process work when we talk about the MySQL database connection in Python. So this is the theoretical that we have seen the concept of this. In previous two videos, we saw installation and we saw database connection, all sorts of things. Now I'm just sharing with you, once we have database, then how to insert certain values into the table that we are going to see now. So I'll just share with you that concept. Okay, now see. Here we are importing mysql.connector that we already installed. Then here this my connection variable. So create the connection object, mysql.connector.connect. Here we are passing 4 parameters: host name, username, password, and database. So here we are using test database and creating the cursor object to execute SQL statement. Now we have insert into employee. Employee is a that given table name in test database. So test is a database name, employee is a table name. So insert into employee, we have these 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fields: name, ID, salary, department ID, branch name, and these values. So these percentage is type format specifier. So it's a format specifier, percentage, and it is recognized by cursor method. So now we are putting these actual values over here. This is the row values are provided in the form of tuple. So because of it is within the parenthesis, so this is known as tuple. And if we are following square bracket, then this is known as list. So we have John as a name, we have ID 110, we have salary 25,000, department ID 201, branch name New York. Then we have this try, inserting the values into the table. We use this execute method and pass these two objects. One is value. We are passing value as well as this SQL. These two that parameters are passing through this execute. And then we have commit the transaction. So commit is always used when the transaction is going to be complete. It is not partial, it is complete transaction. Then we use commit. Except if anything which is not acceptable, then it roll back the operation, and suddenly we are going to print through row count record inserted. So because we are just inserting that values of this first row, so one record inserted. This is the outcome. Now in the next example, this is for the multiple. So here only the syntax which is different. We are passing multiple rows over here. First row is this one. So this tuple is representing number of rows. So this is one tuple. This is one tuple. This is second tuple. This is third tuple. So because 3 tuples are there, it means in our table employee, we are going to insert 3 records. And for each row, we have these 5 different values. So these 5 values are here. So this is the way that we are putting, and these tuples are inside this list. You see this is square bracket. So 3 tuples are inside this list. Now we again just run this method, execute many, and pass these to SQL comma val, inserting the values into the table, and then invoke that commit function for committing the transaction, and print this records inserted. If anything which is not desirable is happening during this insertion operation, then it roll back the operation. And finally, we close my connection.close. So here we have this outcome, 3 records inserted. Now the next is, third example is to return the ID. So here we have import mysql.connector, then we have simply .connect method. We are passing 4 parameters through this. Then we have cursor, my connection.cursor, SQL insert into employee. We are inserting this value, my 105, 28,000, 202 Guyana. Then similarly, we invoke execute, pass this SQL, comma, well, inserting values into the table. Then we have a commit method invocation, and then finally record inserted with ID. So this last row ID means it will return the result of the last row of ID. So whenever we insert row, it is insert by insert ID, which is also known as in SQL like row ID. So we can say insert ID, we can say row ID. Here we have last row ID, so it means it will return ID of last row of that given table. And finally, except this rollback, if something which is not acceptable happen, then it roll back the operation and finally close the object, my connection object. So here we have this outcome, 1 record inserted, ID 0. 1 record is inserted because of we are only inserting these values. Only single row values are going to be inserted. That's why it is known as 1 record inserted. And it is returning last row ID, which is also known as row ID or insert ID equals to 0. Now I'm sharing you the outcome of these 3 segments. Just 1 minute. What sort of outcome is coming? I'm just giving you that detail. So here we have this test database. This is the employee table. An employee table, we have number of columns. And here we will see that values we are already stored. Now see, so we have name, ID, salary, department ID, and branch name. So this is that we have. And if we see in form of this table, so now we have this result, name, zone 102, 25,000, 201, New York. Similarly, we have inserted very first example that we have inserted 1 row, then we have inserted 3 rows, and then at the end we have inserted 1 row. So total 5 rows should be here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the way that we may talk about the database connection, and we may talk about that behavior of MySQL by using this Python. It is very simple. Once you go through the practice, definitely you will remember the number of steps you have followed during this whole process. Thank you very much. If you like these videos, please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon so that once I upload latest video, you will get the notification. This is very good journey till now. I have so many motivations with you, and I desire and looking forward for such motivation in upcoming future. Thank you. Good day.